Wolf saves canine German Shepherd from giant python. Then the dog's mother does something shocking. When a highly trained canine German Shepherd was caught in the deadly coils of a giant python deep in the forest, no one expected help to come from a wild animal, let alone a lone wolf. But what happened next stunned even the most hardened rescuers. Because just as the wolf risked everything to save the trapped canine, the dog's mother appeared from the shadows, and what she did left everyone speechless. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you. The mission was supposed to be routine. Kota, a seasoned canine German Shepherd trained in search and recovery, was deployed into the northern forests of Oregon after a hiker went missing. His handler, Officer Ryan Hale, had worked with Kota for over 5 years. They were partners, brothers in arms, always moving as one. But that morning, something went wrong. A sudden landslide from the rains cut them off. The ground shifted beneath Ryan's feet, and before he could react, Kota was gone, swallowed into a thicket of moss-covered trees and dense underbrush. His GPS collar gave a signal for only a few minutes before going dark. By the time backup arrived, Ryan was on his knees, calling out into the forest, panic in his voice, for the first time in years. "Kota! Come on, boy, where are you?" But there was only silence. Kota, meanwhile, was alive, but barely. He had landed hard, bruised and stunned, far from the trail. The forest was damp and deep, and every movement sent a sharp pain down his side. But instinct took over. He limped forward, ears twitching, nose searching for Ryan's scent. He didn't know how long he wandered, but when night fell, the real danger came. The python moved without sound, a massive, muscular predator not native to Oregon, likely an illegal exotic pet that had been released years ago and had grown in secret. Kota sensed it too late. The instant he turned, the coils struck like thunder. Pain. Crushing, suffocating pain. He yelped, loud, struggling to bite, to twist, to fight back. But the snake's body was like iron. It wrapped tighter around his ribs. His paws scraped the ground. His vision blurred. Then, a rustle. A low, guttural growl echoed through the clearing. The python hesitated, and from the shadows, a wolf emerged, larger than any Kota had seen. Pale gray fur, piercing amber eyes. It didn't attack immediately. It studied the scene, then let out a sharp bark that echoed through the trees like a warning shot. The snake hissed, turning slightly, and in that split second, the wolf lunged. Fangs sank into scaled flesh. The python recoiled, loosening just enough for Kota to breathe. The wolf didn't stop. It fought with a savage precision, clawing, biting, dodging. Kota collapsed to the side, gasping for air, watching as the wolf drove the serpent backward, deeper into the brush. And then, silence. The wolf returned, limping slightly, blood on its neck. It stood over Kota, eyes locked with his. There was no threat, only understanding. Kota, panting, gave a soft whimper of thanks. A gesture only another canine might understand. The wolf responded by sitting, keeping watch. That's when another sound echoed from beyond the trees. A bark, high-pitched, rapid, desperate. Kota's ears perked up. He knew that bark, that rhythm. It was her, his mother, Dahlia. She had been retired from service years ago, but she was still on the property, still sharp, still loyal. She had escaped her pen that morning when Kota's distress bark rang out across the air, and now she had found him. Dahlia burst through the trees like a storm, graying muzzle streaked with mud and tears in her eyes. Yes, tears. She rushed to her son, sniffed him furiously, and then, to the shock of the wolf, placed herself between Kota and any danger, including the python if it returned. Her growl was low, ancient, maternal. The wolf didn't flinch. Instead, it stepped back, respectfully. Kota lay between them, too weak to move, but very much aware. In that moment, in the heart of the forest, a wild wolf and a retired canine mother shared a single truth. They had both come for the same reason, to protect him. And something deep inside Kota knew. This story was only beginning. The moon had risen high above the treetops, casting streaks of silver across the damp forest floor. Kota lay motionless, still dazed from the crushing grip of the python. His breathing had stabilized, but each inhale was shallow, labored. His ribs ached with every twitch. Dahlia stayed pressed to his side, her eyes never leaving the shadows. Though her body was aging, her once black fur now dusted with gray, she stood tall, fierce, and alert. The instinct of a mother outweighed the fatigue of time. Across from them, the wolf remained seated, a phantom in the dark. They didn't speak, of course, but there was communication, silent and ancient. Dahlia, growling softly, gave a warning glance. "I'll protect him. Don't come closer." The wolf didn't challenge her. Instead, it stood, turned its head toward the north, and released a single haunting howl into the trees. The sound rolled like thunder through the forest, calling something or someone. For a brief moment, Dahlia's body tensed. Then, silence. Kota stirred. His ear twitched. His eyes blinked open slowly, and he looked up at his mother. She leaned down, nuzzling his muzzle gently, a touch full of comfort, of memories, of a bond that had never broken, even after years apart. Kota had been taken for training at 9 months old. Dahlia had watched him leave the kennel that morning. Ryan had chosen him for a reason, his focus, his drive. But now, seeing her son broken and bloodied in the dirt, Dahlia's body remembered every moment of his puppyhood. The way he used to tuck his head beneath her chest when thunderstorms came. The way he mimicked her bark when he was barely old enough to walk. And now he was here. Not a warrior, not a soldier, just her pup. She licked the side of his face slowly. Kota closed his eyes again. Then, branches snapped nearby. Dahlia rose like lightning, standing protectively over Kota. Her hackles bristled, but it wasn't the python. It was another wolf, smaller, younger. Its fur was mottled brown, its paws hesitant on the leaves. It looked first to the pale wolf who nodded once, and then padded closer, careful not to cross Dahlia's invisible boundary. It placed something on the ground, meat, not scavenged. Fresh, a peace offering. Dahlia didn't move. She eyed the newcomer with suspicion. But when Kota weakly raised his head and sniffed the air, she took one cautious step forward. She sniffed the meat. It was safe. She brought it to Kota and nudged it toward him. He took a few trembling bites before resting his head back down. The wolf pack, now 2, didn't leave. They settled on the edge of the clearing, close enough to be present, far enough not to provoke Dahlia. And so the night passed, in silence. By morning, Kota was stronger, still in pain, but able to stand on his front legs. Dahlia stayed beside him, encouraging him softly with small nudges and short licks. But what surprised her most was the behavior of the wolves. They began to circle, not in aggression, but in protection. Kota, it seemed, had earned their respect. The python, wounded, was still somewhere nearby. They could all feel it. And now this unlikely alliance? A retired canine mother, her injured son, and a pair of wild wolves had formed an unspoken pact. Dahlia didn't understand why the wolves had come, or why they hadn't vanished into the forest like most would. But one thing was certain. They weren't going to let Kota die. Not here. Not like this. Suddenly, from far off, a voice cracked through the trees. Kota! Ryan. Faint, distant, but real. Kota lifted his head weakly, his tail thudding once against the ground. Dahlia barked back, sharp and clear. Ryan was coming. But so was the python. And the forest was not done with them yet. The bark echoed through the woods like a shot. Ryan froze mid-step, mud up to his shins, sweat streaking down his forehead. His heart pounded in his chest. That bark, he knew it. Dahlia. She was supposed to be at the station kennel. Good girl, he whispered, then shouted into the forest. Kota! Dahlia! I'm coming! He pushed forward, ignoring thorns slicing at his arms, boots slipping over moss-covered roots. Every breath was a prayer. Back at the clearing, Kota lifted his head toward the sound. His breathing had steadied slightly, though Blahman pulsed through his body with every movement. His mother stood over him, eyes darting toward the trees. The wolves were restless now, especially the younger one, who paced near the edge of the clearing, ears flat against its head. Something was wrong. Then it happened. A faint hiss, almost imperceptible. But Dahlia heard it, and so did the pale wolf. Both turned at the same time. The ground beneath the leaves began to shift. Slowly, deliberately. A movement that seemed unnatural in its silence. The python had returned. But it wasn't alone. It wasn't just surviving anymore. It was hunting. From beneath the blanket of fallen leaves, the thick, mottled head emerged, tongue flickering. Its eyes locked directly onto Kota. Wounded, still, vulnerable. Dahlia barked once, short and sharp. The pale wolf responded with a low snarl. They moved as one. Dahlia lunged first, snapping at the snake's neck with terrifying force. The python recoiled, hissing violently, but she held on, teeth embedded deep in its scales. The younger wolf darted in from the left, grabbing the body and yanking hard. The python twisted violently, slamming its body against the trees, coiling wildly in an attempt to shake them off. Kota tried to rise, growling, but his front legs buckled. The snake whipped around, throwing the young wolf against a tree with a sickening thud. Dahlia barked furiously, holding tight. The pale wolf jumped on the python's midsection, clawing, biting, shaking. Blood sprayed across the leaves. And then, another sound. Boots, breaking branches. Dahlia! Kota! Ryan burst through the clearing, rifle drawn, and froze. In front of him, a chaos he could barely comprehend unfolded. Two wolves, one massive python, Dahlia, and his canine partner, bloodied and collapsed at the center. No! He shouted, lifting the rifle and aiming carefully. He waited. One clean shot. He needed just one. Then the python lifted its head, coiled to strike directly at Dahlia. Ryan fired. The shot rang out like thunder. The python jerked violently, its head flinging backward. The coil loosened. The wolves scattered. Dahlia backed away, panting hard, her mouth red. The python slithered a few feet, then collapsed, motionless. Silence. Ryan dropped to his knees beside Kota. Oh my God. His voice cracked as he cupped the dog's face. You're alive. You're actually alive. Kota licked his hand weakly. Dahlia patted over and rested her head gently on Ryan's shoulder. He smiled through the tears. You brought him back, you incredible girl. Then he looked up and saw them. The two wolves standing quietly at the edge of the clearing, watching, not afraid, not threatening, just watching. And then, slowly, the pale wolf lifted its head to the sky and howled once. A low, drawn-out sound that sent chills through Ryan's spine. Then both wolves turned and disappeared into the trees. Gone. Like ghosts, Ryan sat there, arms around Kota and Dahlia, heart pounding. He had questions, too many questions. But for now, all he cared about was this. They were alive. But deep in his chest, he knew this wasn't over yet. Because miracles, real miracles, never come without a price. The ranger station stood like a modest outpost on the edge of the forest, dwarfed by the towering pines around it. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed quietly while medical kits, blankets, and gauze were laid out across the long wooden table. Kota lay atop it, his chest slowly rising and falling. His ribs were tightly wrapped, wounds cleaned, and an IV dripping into his front leg. Dahlia sat curled beside him, her head resting near his paws. She hadn't left his side since Ryan carried him out of the woods in his arms. The room smelled of antiseptic and pine. The windows were fogged with the breath of nightfall. But Kota's dreams were filled with wolves. He saw flashes of the pale one, teeth bared not in fury but in defense. The younger one limping, bleeding, still offering meat. Something had happened in those woods, something bigger than a rescue. It felt spiritual, and Kota wasn't the only one who sensed it. Ryan leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes locked on his dogs. He hadn't spoken much since bringing them back, just quiet orders to the staff. He hadn't even removed his muddy boots. His mind was elsewhere, looping through everything he'd seen. 2 wolves, he said to no one. 2 wolves fought a python and saved my dog. A junior ranger across the room looked up. Sir? Ryan blinked. Never mind. But he couldn't forget the look in that pale wolf's eyes. That creature hadn't attacked. It hadn't run. It had protected, and it haunted him. Kota stirred. Ryan moved closer, kneeling. Hey, buddy, he whispered. You're safe now. I got you. Kota licked his hand, weakly, but with recognition. Dahlia let out a low sigh. Not a bark, not a whine, just a release, as if the last thread of tension in her old bones had finally loosened. Ryan sat on the floor beside them, back against the table, his voice softer now. You know, he said, when I first got you, they told me a canine mini bond doesn't last forever. That after a few years, dogs burn out, lose connection, need to be replaced. He laughed under his breath. They don't know a damn thing. Kota closed his eyes again, breathing deeper now. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, there was warmth. The next morning, as the sun spilled over the edge of the forest, something unexpected happened. A ranger rushed into the station, breathless. You're not gonna believe this, he said. Ryan turned. There's a wolf, the ranger continued. At the fence, just standing there. Ryan blinked. What kind of wolf? Big? Pale? Just waiting. Without a word, Ryan walked outside. At the tree line, maybe 50 yards beyond the fence, stood the pale wolf. Its eyes met Ryan's across the distance. It didn't move, didn't growl, didn't flee. It just stood, watching. Ryan stepped closer to the fence, his hands gripping the cold wire. He didn't speak. What could he say? Instead, he gave a slow, respectful nod. The wolf blinked. Then, like smoke in wind, it turned and disappeared into the trees once more. Ryan stood there for a long time, the morning light warming his face. Behind him, Kota was healing. And somewhere in the forest, a silent promise had been made. There was a line between the wild and the world. But sometimes, when love calls loudly enough, even wolves cross it. It had been 4 days since the rescue. Kota was still recovering, but his strength had returned faster than anyone predicted. Dahlia never left him. She even ignored her meals until they were placed right beside his. Her eyes carried the fierce calm of a soldier who had seen battle. And won. Ryan stayed close, too. He canceled his other patrols. The forest could wait. He spent those days walking the perimeter of the station, watching the tree line, scanning the dense Oregon woods. Waiting. Not for danger, but for the wolf. He didn't tell anyone, not even the other rangers. They wouldn't understand, but Ryan had seen something in that wolf's eyes. Not just intelligence, not just instinct. Purpose. Then, on the 5th night, it happened. Ryan was sitting on the back steps of the cabin, sipping lukewarm coffee, when Dahlia barked once, sharp and alert. He turned. Kota was on his feet, shaky but upright, standing at the window, tail stiff. His ears twitched toward the woods. Ryan stood slowly, placing the mug down. He walked into the yard and stopped just before the tree line. And there it was, the pale wolf. But it wasn't alone. Beside it stood the younger wolf, the one that had brought food. And trailing just behind them, 3 pups. Small, nervous, wide-eyed. Their fur was mottled with rain and leaves. They didn't step forward, but they didn't eat either. Ryan's heart skipped. A whole family. Kota let out a soft bark through the cracked door. Not loud, not aggressive. The wolf raised its head, and Ryan understood. They hadn't come to threaten. They hadn't come for help. They had come to return something. Ryan stepped aside and opened the door wider. The wolves didn't approach, but they stayed. For a long time, man and animal watched each other in silence. The pups nestled behind their mother. The pale wolf's tail twitched once, and Ryan noticed something strange. Its back leg, scarred. A deep wound, old and healed badly, likely from a trap or a bullet. And then he knew. That wolf had been rescued before, maybe by someone like him. Maybe not. But somewhere, sometime, that wild soul had known compassion. And now, it had given it back. Ryan knelt in the grass and whispered, "Thank you." The wolf didn't move. Then, to his astonishment, Dahlia walked forward, slowly, cautiously, past Ryan, past the open gate, and into the clearing. She stopped just a few feet from the pale wolf. They stared at each other. Dahlia lowered her head. The wolf mirrored her. And for a second, just a breath of time, predator and protector stood together. Mothers, warriors, survivors. Then the wolf turned, gave one last glance at Kota through the door, and melted into the forest with her family. Gone. But not forgotten. Ryan closed the gate behind Dahlia as she returned. Inside, Kota had already laid back down, but his breathing was steady, his eyes calm. The wild had come knocking, and now it had said goodbye. That night, Ryan sat at the window long after everyone had gone to sleep, not watching for threats, but waiting for stars. Because sometimes, in the deepest part of the woods, you don't lose yourself. You find your tribe, even if they howl at the moon. A week passed. Then two. Kota walked again, first with Ryan's help, then on his own. His ribs were healing, his steps slow but steady. Every time he passed through the station yard, Dahlia would trot beside him, not guarding, not mothering, but walking with quiet pride. She had seen him broken, and now she watched him rise. But something had changed in Kota that went deeper than his body. He no longer barked at shadows. He didn't flinch at sudden sounds. He would sit for long stretches by the window, eyes fixed on the woods, as if listening for something. A sound only he could hear. Ryan noticed it too. One afternoon, while replacing the bandage on Kota's shoulder, he muttered, "You're different now, buddy." Kota wagged his tail once, slowly. "You're not just a K9 anymore," Ryan continued. "You've seen something none of us have." Ryan didn't mean the python. He didn't mean the fight. He meant the wolf. Later that night, a letter arrived at the station, an official notice from the city's K9 unit. They were retiring Dahlia permanently, as expected. But they were also suggesting Kota be removed from active service due to trauma and risk of physical re-injury. Ryan read it twice, then folded it slowly. He looked down at Kota, lying at his feet, chewing gently on an old toy. "You don't deserve to be retired," he said. "You're not finished yet." But part of him knew. Maybe Kota was done being a tool. A badge. A number? Maybe it was time he just got to be a dog. That weekend, Ryan made a decision. He didn't put Kota back into the cruiser. He didn't reassign him to drills. Instead, he took Kota and Dahlia out to the woods. Not for training, not for duty, but to walk. No leash, no gear, just the forest. They walked in silence, leaves crunching beneath their paw and boots. And then, Kota stopped. In the clearing where it all happened, the spot where blood had mixed with rainwater, where fangs had clashed with coils. Kota stood still. He sniffed the air, tail lifted, his ears perked. Ryan felt it too, a presence. Not close, but there, watching. And then, a rustle in the brush. Kota didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just sat. And from the edge of the trees, a shape appeared. The pale wolf. Alone this time. She didn't approach. She stood at a distance, her amber eyes fixed on Kota. Ryan held his breath. Kota looked up at Ryan, then back at the wolf. And then, slowly, gently, he lowered his head in acknowledgement. The wolf mirrored him. Two worlds, one respect. And with that, she turned and disappeared again into the green, this time for good. Ryan let out a long breath. "That was goodbye," he said. Kota barked once, short and soft. When they returned to the station, Ryan wrote his own letter. He didn't ask permission. He filed Kota's retirement himself, not as a loss of service, but as a ceremony. A send-off. K9 Kota, the file read, retired with honor after distinguished service, including one mission that no human will ever fully understand. The next day, Ryan brought Kota and Dahlia home with him for good. He installed a ramp by the porch for Kota's joints, put a heating pad under Dahlia's favorite blanket, and every evening they sat together under the porch light, listening, not to danger, but to memory. Because deep in the forest, there had been a fight, a miracle, a pact. And though the world would never know the full story, Kota did. And he carried it with him, like a heartbeat that echoes in the trees. Spring arrived quietly that year. The snow melted early, and soft buds bloomed along the forest edge. Life returned, not with fireworks, but with whispers, the kind you only notice if you've known silence. Kota had recovered fully, though he walked with a slight limp that never quite went away. But it didn't slow him down. If anything, it reminded everyone of what he'd survived. Ryan moved into a smaller home just outside of town, trading long shifts for peace and quiet. He didn't leave the force, not entirely, but he changed his role. Less field work, more time. Time with Kota, time with Dahlia, and time with the memory of a forest that had given him something he never expected. Perspective. Most days started the same. Ryan would drink his coffee on the porch, Kota lying at his feet, Dahlia sunbathing nearby. They were older now. Both dogs with gray streaks in their coats, slower tails, and heavier eyelids. But they were content. And every now and then, Kota would stand up, ears tilted, and look toward the woods. He never barked, never growled. He just looked, like he remembered something only he could understand. One afternoon, A local school invited Ryan to speak about the K-9 unit. He hesitated at first. He didn't do much public speaking, but eventually agreed. He brought Kota with him. The kids were in awe. "Is he really a hero?" one little girl asked, eyes wide. Ryan smiled. "He's more than that. He's a survivor. He's a friend. And he once made a friend in the forest that changed his life." The children leaned in. Ryan didn't tell them everything. Not about the python, not about the wolf. Some stories are too big for words. Some are meant to be carried, not explained. But when the kids asked if Kota missed being a police dog, Ryan answered honestly. "No," he said, "because being a dog was always enough." That night, back at the house, Ryan found Kota standing by the back door, tail swaying gently. "You want to go out?" he asked. Kota barked once. Ryan opened the door, and Kota walked out onto the grass. He paused at the edge, where the yard met the tree line, and sat. Ryan joined him. Together, they stared into the forest. The stars were coming out, one by one. And then, maybe it was imagination, maybe not, a howl echoed in the distance. Not close, not loud, but there. Kota's ears twitched. His body leaned forward slightly. Ryan didn't say anything. He didn't need to, because some part of the forest had never really let go of Kota. And Kota had never let go of it. The bond formed that night, between a trained K-9 and a wild wolf, hadn't been broken by time or distance. It had simply evolved into memory, into respect, into something sacred. Ryan placed a hand on Kota's head. "We're still listening," he said quietly. Kota rested his head on Ryan's knee and closed his eyes. The forest rustled softly, alive with stories. And the man, the dog, and the mother, who never stopped protecting them all, sat in the quiet. Not because they were waiting, but because they remembered. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and share it with someone who believes in the quiet power of loyalty, the beauty of unexpected friendship, and the kind of courage that lives in both the wild and the human heart. Because some heroes don't wear badges, some howl under moonlight, and some never stop listening.